Thursday forecast calling for showers, maybe an isolated thunderstorm, otherwise mostly cloudy, highs in the lower 80s. Thursday night, chance of a shower or storm before midnight, otherwise partly cloudy, lows around 60. Friday, a slight chance of a shower, otherwise partly sunny, highs in the mid 70s with breezy northwesterly winds. By Friday night, much chillier, partly cloudy, a low around 49. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Thomas in the morning. Thank you for joining and joining up and sharing and however you're interacting visually and really suffering through this, because who needs to look at what could only really be described as Glenn Beck's slightly better looking cousin. I follow Glenn and I get his videos and I'm like, well, my set is not as dark as his. That should be your clue, and my hair still has some of its original color in it because, yes, no, you don't do this with a rinse. Thank you for letting us be in your world this morning, or however you share us, like William Shatner before us. I think we're as, if not more popular in reruns than we are in live plays, but appreciate and share away, please, because I ran into somebody who was a good friend and a ardent listener for years and had no idea we were doing this. So there's always new people to expose to, although be careful what you expose because you could wind up in the hands of law enforcement. So much to get into today. Neil Williamson is going to join us. Property rights and affordable housing. The esteemed senators from the Commonwealth have sent $98 million into the Commonwealth for affordable housing. They announced it yesterday. $1.3 million will go to the Charlottesville Housing and Redevelopment Authority, West Bellamy proprietor there. And of course, they just purchased an office space downtown, so renovations still have to happen. One wonders, when will we see any of the affordable housing? Meanwhile, the Albemarle County supervisors debating what you can do with the property that you own. There's also going to be a master plan meeting in downtown Charlottesville in and around Washington Park for that neighborhood because the planning that we've been doing has been such a bang-up success. I remind anyone who lives in and around central Virginia that Albemarle County and Charlottesville spend as much time in planning meetings, planning commission meetings, as they do in regular public hearings of the supervisors or counselors. So when you feel like everything is just sort of randomly put together, consider how much time we spend planning it. Also, databases, and why something I've asked for shouldn't have manifested as a potential database of something, mainly because we already have a database of those things, but the government wants a database of things that you do personally so that they can keep an eye on you. They're red flags. I mean, it's just red flags. I mean, why should you be worried about that? And besides, we're talking about cannabis, Joe. Why should you defend cannabis? We'll get into that. I don't know if you saw this. RFK has challenged DJT to a debate when they're both at the Libertarian Convention. The Trump campaign said, hey, thanks for reminding everyone that we were invited to speak to the Libertarian Party convention. This year, both of them have been invited, and they both will attend. Kennedy said, hey, while we're both here, why don't we debate there? We'll get into that. But reaction to a story we had for you yesterday, the predictable outcome of the genericizing of the efforts of the Boy Scouts of America have finally come to fruition. On Monday, they officially changed the name of the organization to Scouting for America, but for a decade or more now, they've been referring to most of their activities as scouting activities. They've been slowly walking this brand shift into the common parlance there, but there are an awful lot of people who are having, let's just say, a less than positive reaction to that. There's going to be a debate coming up in 11 days in the 5th Congressional District GOP race. But it may be a debate amongst one person, as the Amherst GOP has announced that they will be holding a debate in the evening of May 20th, and the John McGuire campaign said, we weren't invited, and besides, they broke the rules we agreed to. So we'll get into that as well. Both candidates, you know, Congressman Good joins us every week. John has been invited to come and talk about all the polls that came out yesterday that said 5th District Republicans were asked who would they be most likely to vote for in November versus a generic Democrat, and McGuire got 45% and Good got 31%. Of the vote, and I think that number gets even more challenging if it's the combat veteran from Crozet who is running for the Democratic Party nomination. If it's him, matchups make fights, and I think it's going to be an uphill battle for either of the Republicans against the, and we'll get into it as well. I don't have a horse in the race per se, but I look at this fellow from Crozet and I say, you know, I can recall a time when he would have been running as a Republican. So there's probably a lot of Republicans saying, you know, this guy is, I mean, I know he's a Democrat, and I know he'll do everything Hakeem Jeffries tells him to do, but, I mean, you know, personally. So we'll get into all that, but before we go too much further, we have to pay, and we'll do a little bit more about this. Oh. Neil Williamson from the Free Enterprise Forum is going to come on with us on the subject of property rights, as well as your sovereignty on your own land regarding homestay. And again, you know, a percentage of the population that nary deals in homestay. This is, you know, Airbnb, Verbo, and all that. But albeit to say, it is an incursion of government onto what you do with the property that they tax you on. If it's your property, they tax you on it. But they also want to regulate what you can do. Oh, and there's a bill in the U.S. House of Representatives to take these fine folks who lost their liberties, at least for a brief period of time, after protesting at the University of Virginia and other college campuses. If found guilty of any U.S. crimes, their sentence could be, according to a bill that was introduced in the House of Representatives, 6 months in Gaza. That'll be a stern wake-up call for the folks in the group LGBTQ for Hamas. But it is Teacher Appreciation Week. Time magazine, perhaps falling short of making the teacher their person of the year, has this cover. I have a master's degree, 16 years of experience, work 2 jobs, 2 extra jobs, and donate blood to pay my bills. And of course, teachers, gosh, I raised 3 kids that were biologically connected to me, and I would sit down at the dinner table with the 3 of them and my wife and think, what am I going to do here? You know, it's daunting when you're looking at 3 faces who are like, yeah, who are you and what do you have to say to us, smart guy? Never mind a room full of, well, depending on the school division, 15 to 30, depending on the school district. So the idea, the concept of being a teacher is certainly something that I understand the speciality of it. As we go through Teacher Appreciation Week, I want to make it clear that one of the things that we rail about here is the teachers union, Randy Weingarten, and the way certainly we learned about how they pulled the strings of the federal government and Virginia state government during COVID, and We saw what they did to Terry McAuliffe because Terry McAuliffe couldn't recant his ridiculous statement over parents' rights because the teachers union said, you know what, you may lose this election, but you better not give up this narrative that parents have no right in their kids' lives. When they pulled President Biden's speaking string, he said, I'd like the kids to go into American Federation of Teachers run schools at the age of 2. But here's my question for these teachers who are profiled here in Time magazine. You have that master's degree. I'll put it back up there. Master's degree, and have to work 2 extra jobs and donate blood to pay my bills. Come in close. And I mean this as a friend. Why are you still supporting the American Federation of Teachers then? I mean, is it fair to ask, much in the same way people have asked the poor black communities of the inner cities, what have these people done for you lately? I mean, you know, how many years have we been doing this two-step with the American Federation of Teachers and the unionized teachers movement? We're just going into it. Virginia has just allowed collective bargaining, and teachers were the first ones to jump in there with Randy Weingarten's blessing, you know, a flag just like you see over the Hamas protests, waving the flag of Randy Weingarten and the cult of teachers' unions. But if the premise of Time magazine's cover is that teachers with all these postgraduate degrees have to work as a barista in the morning before class starts, or perhaps a bartender afterwards, donate plasma to pay their own bills, and we see this. The demography of the radio station that we're purchasing is, 4,000 people drive out of Waynesboro and Stanton into Charlottesville every day. Some of them work at the university, some of them work in the intelligence industry, but many of them are either law enforcement, first responders of some sort, or teachers, civil servants who, on the civil servant salaries, which are higher than a lot of average salaries in Central Virginia anyway, but still not nearly enough to pay the freight of, oh, hold it, there's that phrase again, affordable housing. So they find affordability in places like Waynesboro and Stewart's Draft and Stanton, and then they drive on I-64 into Charlottesville. But again, I ask, if you were in a romantic relationship and you were treated this poorly and you were given so little opportunity to excel at what you do, why would you stay? And I ask the same question every time this comes up and Teachers Week comes up and the all too real. I'm not saying the teacher on the cover of Time magazine is lying to you. I'm just saying, can we look at who the people are who are saying, no, we're looking out for you? How many decades has this teachers union con been going on? Meanwhile, folks like Randy Weingarten and the directorate in the teachers union is never minding the directorate of your local schools. I was talking with Tom in Nelson, who was talking about the nearing $20,000 expended per student at Nelson County schools, so that the realtors can go out and say, look at how great the school is in Nelson County. They spend $20,000. This is why you will pay a lot of money for a house, and we next week we'll talk to the Charlottesville-Albemarle Association of Realtors. Their next quarter report is coming out, and we'll have the details on who's growing. But it's been Nelson County for quite a bit now, and more the supervisors are being hit with development plans out the base of Wintergreen and along the 151 corridor and places like that, building homes. But the teachers who work in Nelson County can't afford them. And why aren't people building homes that the teachers who live in Nelson County can afford? That's the rub. It's not that the teachers aren't being paid well. Teachers in many cases are being paid well, but so much of those budgets are being taken into the front office. 6 figures paid to the average bureaucratic leader of a school, even if they had spent 10, 15 years as a teacher and, worked their way up, kept their nose to the grindstone of the people they needed to keep their nose to the tuchus of, and worked their way up into the world of teachers, the heaven at the end of the rainbow, where you can get out of the classroom and stop teaching the kids, but earn lots of money in the schools by being the vice principal for equity and inclusion or whatever else. Jim writes in to the YouTube feed, let's not forget what economic policies they vote for as well. Well, of course, being a good teachers union member, you're told, you better vote for the Joe Biden campaign, Kamala Harris, they're out there looking out for you. How many years have they been telling you this? And like I said, I'm not questioning the veracity of what the young lady says on the cover of Time magazine. I'm saying, why are you blaming us for it? Why don't you start looking around and saying, hold it, then maybe we should try something different.
This is the Racing Wire Minute with Brian Belansky.
McDriver is McMovin. That story next.
She can stand, she can do more, like build a rocket and launch it soar, clean the oceans and make the world a better place. Oh, she can stand.
Learn more at She Can Step.
The driver known on social media as McDriver is changing teams in 2025. Michael McDowell is moving from Front Row Motorsports to Spire Motorsports. McDowell will team up with Corey LaJoie and Carson Hocevar. He will drive the number 71 Chevy. He's been with Front Row since 2018. In that time, he has 2 wins, a Daytona 500, and a win on the Indy Road Course. He also has qualified twice for the playoffs. He now brings the experience from 470 Cup Series starts to Spire. McDowell said it's going to take some hard work, but I feel like everything is in place for us to be successful as a race team, to win races, and contend for championships.
Your Thursday forecast calling for showers, maybe an isolated thunderstorm, otherwise mostly cloudy, highs in the lower 80s. Thursday night, chance of a shower or storm before midnight, otherwise partly cloudy, lows around 60. Friday, a slight chance of a shower, otherwise partly sunny, highs in the mid 70s with breezy northwesterly winds. By Friday night, much chillier, partly cloudy, a low around 49. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Thomas in the morning, and there are plenty of folks out there who work in the teaching profession who will tell you this very thing. And again, Time magazine, as we come to the culmination of Teacher Appreciation Week, talking about the plight of the teacher, and understand a business reality. There are realities to how you're supposed to run a business, and Let's stop using the word business for just the sake of argument here and call it an enterprise. The enterprise of education, public or private. You have a responsibility as the operator of an enterprise, whether it be a commercial business or a public school or a church. Your job as the leader of that organization is to give your employees, those who work with you in your enterprise, all the tools necessary to be successful. I think that's axiomatic, right? Most people understand that. You don't need to have a degree from the Darden School of Business to understand that. But one of those things is, what is success? What does success look like? Now, teaching, you would think, should be easy, right? That should be an easy figure. A kid comes into the classroom not knowing algebra and then leaves the classroom knowing algebra. You've succeeded. I mean, it should be pretty straightforward what success is in the world of education. Lord knows we've created enough tests, right? That should teach you how to keep an eye on tests. We have databases, and that story will come up in a little while as well. Oh, databases, got to keep databases, because what else are we going to pay the statisticians to do? But if the teachers are being maltreated, and understand, in the pardon me, in the enterprise of education, who is the most important person? And shouldn't, in any enterprise, the most important person, the most valuable person, be the one that's rewarded the most generously from those revenues created by the enterprise? I mean, certainly LeBron James gets paid very well by the Los Angeles Lakers, more so than some guy who is the 10th man off the bench, albeit that the Lakers are ousted from the playoffs. But to understand what I'm going, you've heard of LeBron James. When Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt or George Clooney signs up to do a movie, it immediately becomes quite much more likely to be a huge hit at the box office. So therefore, a movie producer is going to compensate them more so, because their efforts in this entertainment will be good. When Taylor Swift announces a concert in your neighborhood, the odds of selling out your arena go way up, so she is compensated for it. Who is the most valuable person, most important person in the enterprise of education? Wouldn't it be the teacher? Certainly you would think the person who is in the classroom with your children any number of hours of day. Elementary school, K to 12, they're in the classroom with you 6 hours out of the day. That's a full third of the day spent with one person. And they're paid like a Burger King manager. Perhaps even less than a Burger King manager. Meanwhile, people who are not even going to darken the portal of a classroom are rewarded with 3 times the salary. For what? For making sure that the forms get filled out and sent to Richmond and Washington, D.C. to prove that we've complied with whatever thing it is that they're charged with making sure we comply with. Our friend Chris Graham at the Augusta Free Press is FOIA-ing the University of Virginia to find out how much they're paying and what the contract details are for basketball coach Tony Bennett. Can we FOIA people to find out what the details are on teachers' salaries and why the algebra teacher is paid a third of what some bureaucrat that never enters, and then maybe they were great teachers for 10 or 15 years, and eventually, like I said, by keeping their nose to the brownstone, have managed to work their way into a front office job in the local school division, so now they can take home a 6-figure salary without ever having to go and stand in front of 30 disinterested faces. And I know there are many people who hate that idea. I mean, it's we joked about William Shatner in the opening segment, but the whole story arc of the Star Trek movies, Captain Kirk becomes an admiral and gets out of the captain's chair and hates it. I'm sure there are many teachers who would loathe the idea of being an administrator. Ugh. I think of people like Will Cook, the amazing choir teacher at Charlottesville High School. I could never see him being an administrator. It would drive him crazy. The people who want to be in there and teach kids about Shakespeare or Chaucer or the Roman Empire or whatever it is that you love to do about teaching. Well, you don't want to become the vice principal in charge of equity, whose only job is to come up with PowerPoint presentations for every third school board meeting, right? But many people, it's well compensated, because that's where your tax dollars go. So when we consider the plaint of the school teacher during Teacher Appreciation Week, let's look at who's to blame for that, and start calling out the teachers' unions who every year come back and say, hey, all you teachers, pay your dues, vote for the people we want you to vote for because they will authorize our creation of teachers' unions in your area. And it hasn't been to the benefit of anybody. And it certainly doesn't give the teachers the tools necessary to be successful, because if your English teacher, if your mathematics teacher is worried about, oh gosh, I've got to get to the, or has to close the bar that they work at night, and so they're there until 2 or 3 in the morning and they can't, and then they come in, and I'm not saying they're hungover, I'm just saying that they worked till 2 in the morning at some restaurant or some bar just to earn extra scratch to pay their bills. Well, they're not their best and their brightest when it comes to teaching. So what do you do? What do you do, Joe? Well, gosh, gee, I don't know. Could we do something like money follows the child's school choice? You see on the screen, full disclosure, I am part of the Virginia Institute for Public Policy. I host their radio shows, and do a lot for them. The Virginia Education Opportunity Alliance is a partnership between Middle Resolution Group and the Heritage Foundation and the Virginia Institute for Public Policy. We helped craft the Money Follows the Child school choice law that failed at the hands of the same people who insist that you must vote for Randy Weingarten and the Democrats. Randy Weingarten and the teachers' unions, the Democratic Party of Virginia. And I don't know, it shouldn't be. I mean, this is the stomach churning part. It shouldn't be about whose political party it is, because of course Randy Weingarten will say, I'm not partisan. Meanwhile, we have the evidence of her interacting with the White House regarding COVID rules and shutdowns and lockdowns. You say, well, Joe, what is this Virginia Education Opportunity Alliance you talk of? And what's that going to do for the plight of a teacher in Charlottesville or Albemarle County? Well, think about it for a second. And we're starting to have empirical evidence on the fact that in places where money follows the child, meaning parents, even if it's not 100%, parents will be given the opportunity with some of the monies that are allocated by the local governments to pay for the year's education. And the capitulation, the compromise has often been 50%. But think about that. So Albemarle County is going to spend $16,000 per student per year. We talked about Nelson. It could be $20,000. So what could you do if you had $10,000 in your hand to spend on education? Would you keep them going to Nelson County schools? I mean, heck, for $10,000, you can pick pretty much any of the private schools in the area and pay their tuition without batting an eye. Tom writes in, I've taken a peek at parts of the 2024 to 25 Nelson Public School budget. It's mind-blowing. A county with only 15,000 full-time residents and a decline in enrollment for over a decade. Well, Tom, you point out something else that these schools don't want you to know about. In Central Virginia, we're watching all of these schools plateau and as you said, somewhat decline in enrollment. But you again go under that false premise, like our friend Clark says. The point of communism is not to lift up the lives of all the proletariat. The actual reason for communism is to centralize power in a small place amongst a small number of people. It's just the sales pitch that they use is, we're going to elevate everyone's life. It's a lie, of course, as many sales pitches are. The reason for the school funding is so that realtors can go out and say, move to Nelson County, look at how much they care about children. But what happens when money follows the child, teachers wind up making more money because the schools with the best teachers get the best results. Therefore, parents, having seen this and shopping around for the best for their kids, say, I want my kids to go here because they have the best teachers. And then the schools with the best teachers pay them the best because they make the most. That's how money follows the child would actually be the best answer to Teacher Appreciation Week.
Thursday forecast calling for showers, maybe an isolated thunderstorm, otherwise mostly cloudy, highs in the lower 80s. Thursday night, chance of a shower or storm before midnight, otherwise partly cloudy, lows around 60. Friday, a slight chance of a shower, otherwise partly sunny, highs in the mid 70s with breezy northwesterly winds. By Friday night, much chillier, partly cloudy, a low around 49. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Joe Thomas in the morning. Thank you for tuning in, YouTube and Rumble, and however it is you join in to the fray. Appreciate it. You can call with comment to 434-882-4217. Soon, very soon, there will be the ability to speak live, which is, I found something very, very interesting. Even with all these live stream programs on the interwebs, very few of them have live callers. I mean, certainly the ones that are just, a radio show with some cameras in the studio, and boy, isn't that as interesting as watching paint dry, says the guy who's basically doing a radio show in front of a camera. But very soon we'll have the chance to do this live. But before we can embrace the classic Bill O'Reilly, let's do it live! I'll do it live! Put your voicemails there at 434-882-4217, or you can just send emails to jtinthemorningradio@gmail.com, or if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, there are chat options, which is kind of neat, something interesting. You can just kind of, as Jim and Tom have done on the YouTube feed. I don't have the Rumble feed up, but I get an email every time somebody posts something to the Rumble, so I will see it, so post it up there and make the comments to certainly teachers and Teacher Appreciation Week and what we expect of teachers. And then, of course, the sickle that comes along with the hammer is that then the teachers, in order to stay right with the teachers union, then teach the things the teachers union wants them to teach. So they teach them about equity and fairness rather than the Pythagorean theorem. This is why so many children graduate high school without getting a degree, because we enacted things like No Child Left Behind by a Republican president, which just creates more tests that teachers, in order to eke out the meager living that they do, have to score, or though I'm barely making ends meet as it is, and then I've got to make sure my SOL scores are high enough. And I still say in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we should have come up with a better acronym, because I don't think anyone in Richmond actually knew what most people think the initials SOL stand for. Or maybe my neighborhood was just different than yours. So certainly your comments on that are welcome to jump in with us there. I want to move on to databases. There's a famous line from the McCarthy hearings. I hold in my hand, Senator, a list. And if you're a sports fan, you love your statistics. And for many years, I've said, well, for many, meaning the last 2 or 3 years, I have been an ardent contributor to the news coverage of accidental overdoses amongst elementary school kids. Because the Virginia General Assembly for the past couple of years has been trying to promote the idea of government police officers being able to enter your home and search your premises with no better reason than the fact that you are on a list of people who owned firearms. Because the laws that the leftists in Virginia would try to promote are the ones that would say, hey, you own a gun because you're on a list. We, as the government, need to be able to come into your home unannounced, without a warrant, because just being on the list means you have been warranted, to search your premises to make sure that you have safely secured your firearms. Meanwhile, far more, especially elementary school and middle school aged children, many, 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 many more in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Not that it's a race, and not that I would covet an equilibrium of children who are harmed, but many, at this point, many, many more children are harmed because they get into their parents' gummies. Where's the common sense gummy control? Where's the gum control legislation? I guess it would have to be gummy control. I want common sense gummy control legislation. I want red flags for people who may be taking too many of their THC gummies. Perhaps if you've had a domestic call to your house, a red flag should go up and will restrict access. We'll confiscate all of your gummies, just to keep things safe for a little while until things de-escalate. These are all the same things they say they should do about guns, but children in the Commonwealth at an astounding percentage rate are far more likely to be harmed by their parents' unattended gummies than they are by any unattended guns. Yet the politicians want to continue to create more and more ways for people to get these gummies easier and easier. Why we'll have stores all over the place. Meanwhile, they want to restrict the stores that sell the gunnies. Yeah, maybe we'll call them gunnies versus gummies. So they want to make it easier for you to get the gummies and harder to get the gunnies. I don't know. Every time I use the phrase gunny, I think of R. Lee Ermey. What is your major malfunction, numbnuts? Had a chance to have him on the show several times. What a treat. What a neat character he is. But you see what the hypocrisy of this, something that certainly can be very dangerous. A firearm certainly is something serious, as all legal gun owners will tell you. But the same legislators who will tell you they need to have more and more ways to come into your house because you're on a list now want a list. The Virginia Department of Health, at the behest of Governor Youngkin, wants to create a database of children who had to go to the emergency department of their local hospital system because of an accidental gummy THC overdose. And you say, but Joe, he's a Republican. Aren't you? No, wrong is wrong. I don't care which party comes attached to wrong is wrong. We already have that database. We already have that data in the health system records. We wouldn't know about it if we didn't already have that information. If we didn't already know this information, how would I be able to report on the instances of 5th and 6th graders going to the hospital over overdoses? because they got into their parents' gummies? Why the story that promotes the database itself in the Virginia Mercury, Graham Mumaw, former of the Charlottesville Daily Progress, Virginia health officials launch surveillance system. Can we show them the story? There it is. Virginia health officials, well, you can read it for yourself. A surveillance system for kids sickened by cannabis. You say, well, but Joe, that's Governor Youngkin. You should love this because he's a Republican. No, I don't love this stuff. I don't love databases. I hold in my hand a list. We already have this information. We don't need another government list. Because here's the problem. Once the government gets good and proficient at creating lists, then what's to stop them from using their list of firearms owners to go into the house? Well, you let us come into your house and take a look around to see what happens with the kids. It's a red flag. It's the same thing. So what will happen is this legislation, this list, will then be expanded to include other things that the next governor doesn't like. The premise is the thing, not the function itself, not the actual list itself. The premise of the list. The premise of the list is to then create extra constitutional ways for them to come into your home and deprive you of your privacy. Now, what did John Adams tell us? And this is where I'm not taking a side on this, because I'll be the first one to point out to you that you're like, Joe's taking the side of the druggies. What did John Adams tell us about our constitutional republic? I mean, not specifically, neither you nor I was there, but it's been chronicled. What did John Adams tell us would be the requirement of we the people, the quid for our pro quo? If we were going to make a government governed by we the people, what was going to be responsible on those people? You remember? No, I'm waiting for you to... All right. He said that it was important that we be a moral society. Because I don't believe, and I think John Adams agrees, that you can be self-governing without being self-governing. If you don't understand thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor, if you don't understand thou shalt not steal, if you don't understand the ramifications of thou shalt not murder, you can't be self-governing. I'm sorry, you just can't. And I know that sounds like I'm making the case for the authoritarian state of President Biden and Obama and Clinton, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we, the people, have to take up our fair share of it. If we, the people, want the gig back, if we, the people, want to continue to be we, the people, and not Islamista, we have to get it back, which means we have to go back to being a moral society, which means understanding that if I have drugs in the house, I have to be attentive to make sure that my kids don't get in touch with them. And if I have firearms in the house, the same thing is true. And I have to be upfront with my kids, and I have to make sure my kids understand what these things are and why they're there. Why not have a database of Lipitor prescriptions or Xanax or any other thing? Oh, that could happen. Premise, right? Once you have the premise of the databases, why stop there? Why, Mr. Senator, I hold in my hand a list. But all of this stuff you and I do, only matters if we go back to being a moral society, which means, and I hate to say this, we have to stop pretending like talking about morality is somehow a violation of the separation of church and state, which has really become much more like a confrontation between church and state.
Thursday forecast calling for showers, maybe an isolated thunderstorm, otherwise mostly cloudy, highs in the lower 80s. Thursday night, chance of a shower or storm before midnight, otherwise partly cloudy, lows around 60. Friday, a slight chance of a shower, otherwise partly sunny, highs in the mid 70s with breezy northwesterly winds. By Friday night, much chillier, partly cloudy, a low around 49. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Hey, Joe Clark. So, completely non-topical, but where is P. Diddy? It's been a month and a half since we had very public raids on his two homes. And since March the 27th, we have not had one word. Now, I don't hang out with P. I don't know Mr. Diddy's music, but I know he was a pop icon at one time. This story is salacious. It's scandalous. They love dirty laundry, and this has completely gone away. So, to me, the story is not so much the disappearance of Diddy as it is the disappearance of the story and their ability to manipulate the narrative. How was this damaging to whom that they completely quashed the story? Just something to look at.
And of course, the operative question is, what did he do? And this is the world where the intransparency. This is what we've become, because something as big as Sean Combs' arrest and the massive raid, and the manhunt that went on that gripped for 2 or 3 days, and it certainly was OJ-esque. I mean, right down to, people screen capping Sean Combs' head coming out of the door of a white Ford Bronco. And then, as Dr. Clark said, poof, it was gone. What were they looking for? The allegations had to do with human trafficking, and then, of course, questions come up about Epstein's Island and things like that, and of course, nature. If we still taught physics, you would know that nature abhors a vacuum. So when those kind of things happen, then the vacuum starts to demand to be filled with something. So it becomes speculative and that kind of thing. But law enforcement is, to be fair, justice must prevail in somewhat what's the right word? Because intransparency is perhaps the right word for it, but it's not entirely the right concept for it. I'm going to draw a comparison in this to the search for Hanagram. Wherever you may be living and watching this, you may have heard the stories of Hanagram going missing. It's the Virginia Tech student who was at a concert at the John Paul Jones Arena. It was Metallica. And went outside and got stuck outside because they weren't letting people back into the show once they had exited the arena. And so she disappeared after that. Nobody saw her. A couple of people saw her wandering. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm conflating the two stories. They both wound up with the same hitter. She was the one that was out in the pubs in the corner. Hanagram was the one out in the pubs on the corner, and then left and kind of wandered the streets for a while and then disappeared, seen on security camera footage with the man who would eventually go down for her murder, Jesse Matthew Jr. But the point of the story isn't necessarily the point was the process that they went through, and this is to Dr. Clark's call about Sean Combs, is that all through the process we had the national news media come swarming down onto the University of Virginia grounds in the city of Charlottesville, a little sleepy college town on the side of the mountains. Thomas Jefferson lived here. And so the national news media descends down. I had a reporter working for me that was doing regular nightly updates with Nancy Grace on national television. And through it all, the police chief, who is now the police chief at the university, Tim Longo, managed to coordinate information with the press so that the press would be kept up to date on what the process was while not infringing on the rights of whoever may be persons of interest. Because it's very easy in these sort of vacuumous situations to wind up hearing that so-and-so has been interrogated as a person of interest. They must have been the doer. That's I too. But he managed to control this in a way that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, other towns have invited him when crises have come about, or at least schooled on how he managed to keep the media informed without corrupting the process of a judicial investigation, so that the perpetrator could be caught, evidence could be collected so that in a court of law they could be proven to be incontrovertibly the person who did it, convicted by a jury of his peers, and then sent to jail for an appropriate punishment. So that the community could rest at ease saying an injustice was done and then justice was served. And understand there were a couple of quick points on how that goes about, because it is most important in a free society that you understand two things. Number one, crime will happen. And that if you insist that somebody do something about stopping crime, then you don't want a free society anymore. Because in a free society, there are going to be people who, like we were saying in the last segment, fail at that simple premise of immortal damnation awaits you if you steal. That your eternal soul is going to be sanctioned by the Creator, your Creator, if you bear false witness against your neighbor. That there is a court far more important than the Supreme Court of the United States. And there is no appellate process. You don't sit down with Jack Diamond in your defense room and wait to defend your life like Albert Brooks once hypothesized. Your ledger, your database is pulled up and, oh, well, you did this. No, I didn't. Yeah, you did. But in that world where people fall prey to forgetting that thou shalt not steal, so there will be people who will steal. So thoroughly investigating those thefts, those burglaries, those murders, so that, on this earth, we as a community can rest at ease that when people fall short of their morality, we can find them and punish them for transgressing some other free citizen's rights. It's a pretty simple system. We like to obfuscate it. What was the wonderful Pink Floyd album title right before they made it big with The Wall and Dark Side of the Moon? Oh, Obscured by Clouds. That's what our moral society is. We've obscured it by clouds because we like to think of, well, it's not really a lie because here's why I told you a lie. It really wasn't bearing false witness against my neighbor, but he was a putz and he deserved to get fired. See what I mean? Anyway, let's go back to the database. Couple of other reactions to the I hold in my hand a list point. Joe, at what point, Mark writes in to jtinthemorningradio@gmail.com, at what point do they start going after their own? It seems like these gummy overdoses are amongst people who would have voted for the political party that allowed for such things, yet here they come ready to punish them for not securing their gummies, much in the same way they expect the gunnies to secure their firearms. Parentheses, I like that turn of a phrase, keep using it. What is it? It's gunnies versus gummies. But what is your responsibility to take care of them? And this becomes a bigger abstract than just what Virginia code is. It's a battle that Patrick Henry was fighting when he stood before the General Assembly and gave that wonderful speech that culminates with "Give me liberty or give me death." But I suggest that many people go and read the first part of his speech that culminates with what we all know: "Give me liberty or give me death." We all know that part of it. But do you know the opening of his speech? I don't have it in front of me, but I know that in the past we've read it into the public record. And it's as telling as anything else. And it speaks to the fact that he was speaking to a General Assembly that was equally split amongst the idea of, I've figured out the scam. I know how to work within how King George does things. I don't need to revolt. I figured it out, Patrick. I know how to make my business work. I've got some government contracts. I've got some grants from the government. Oh, no, that's today. I'm sorry, that wasn't what... But if King George had been able to figure out a federal grant program and some other bureaucratic approaches, boy, King George, if we could go get King George, throw him into our blue police box and fly forward to the year 2024, King George would say, "My God, I could have had a V8." All these things, all these officers that the administrative state has sent forth from Washington to eat out our substance, he says, quoting from the Declaration of Independence. So as Patrick Henry faced a General Assembly that was equally split amongst people who wanted to keep the king around because they had figured out how to, survive in their system, because we're creative folks, and, keep my head down. I'm just not, liberty? Pfft, I've got surety. I've got it figured out. What Patrick Henry was trying to convince them of is that this is the slow boil of the frog that's about to become dinner for the Frenchmen. Is that you think you have surety, you think you've got your things covered until they come for you. And I think Mike's email is about those folks who voted for the very authoritarians who are doing these things. It's as Martin Niemöller said, and you've heard me say it before, and you're rolling your eyes saying, here he goes again with his poem. First they came for the Tea Party activists, and I didn't say anything because I wasn't a Tea Party activist. Then they came for the MAGA extremists, and I didn't say anything because I wasn't a MAGA extremist. And then they came for me. And when they came for me, nobody was left to speak up for me. That's all I'm saying, is that we the people outnumber they the authoritarians. So why do we ask? Because we don't want, or at least we think we've been gaslit into thinking we don't want freedom because it's scary.
Thursday forecast calling for showers, maybe an isolated thunderstorm, otherwise mostly cloudy, highs in the lower 80s. Thursday night, chance of a shower or storm before midnight, otherwise partly cloudy, lows around 60. Friday, a slight chance of a shower, otherwise partly sunny, highs in the mid 70s with breezy northwesterly winds. By Friday night, much chillier, partly cloudy, a low around 49. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Okay. You win, Frankie. So a couple of emails came into jtinthemorningradio@gmail.com, plus a text to 882-4217. I forgot, the phone number that we use is actually a cell phone, so you can text that, or you can text through the YouTube or Rumble chat functions that go along with the operations of the Joe Thomas in the Morning program. Says, Joe, please elaborate on the opening of Patrick Henry's speech. My kids' history teachers would never do it, so please, if you could. You are correct about the opening of the famous speech being as important as its culmination. So, okay, at the risk of sounding like, the podcast from history, Edmund Burke's All Things Connectioned. No, that's James Burke, but I changed it to Edmund Burke. Really. Okay, so here's how the speech begins. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's a couple of minutes long, but it wasn't a long speech. But he's speaking to the Virginia General Assembly in Richmond. The question before the House is one of awful moment to this country. For my own part, I consider it as nothing less than a question of freedom or slavery. Should I keep back my opinions at such a time through fear of giving offense? Should I consider myself as guilty of treason towards my country? Mr. President, it is natural to man to indulge in the illusions of hope. But the part of wise men engaged in a great struggle is this the part of wise men engaged in a great struggle for liberty? Are we disposed to be of the number of those who, having eyes, see not, and having ears, hear not, the things which so nearly concern their salvation? For my part, whatever anguish of spirit it may cost, I am willing to know the whole truth, to know the worst, and to provide for it. I know, and he goes on, and so do I guess. That's just the first two paragraphs. And you know the speech because you all know the culmination, give me liberty or give me death. But that's how and think about it. This is his plea to the General Assembly to take legislative steps to support the idea of independence, that which Jefferson would chronicle so beautifully in his legal filing under Magna Carta called the Declaration of Independence. He goes on to say, Patrick Henry, I know no way of judging of the future but by the past. It's almost like he could be a radio or podcast host, couldn't he? I'm sorry. I'm not claiming any Patrick Henry-ness, but I'm just saying it. This all sounds familiar to you at all? Anyway, I know no way of judging of the future but by the past. And judging by the past, I wish to know what there has been in the conduct of the British ministry for the last 10 years to justify those hopes with which gentlemen have been pleased to comfort themselves and the House. It is that insidious smile with which our petition has been lately received. Trust it not, sir. Suffer not yourselves to be betrayed with a kiss. Ask yourselves, are fleets and armies necessary to a work of love and reconciliation? Let us not deceive ourselves, sir. These are the implements of war and subjugation, the last arguments to which kings resort. I ask, gentlemen, sir, has Great Britain an enemy in this quarter of the world to call for all accumulation of navies and armies? No, sir, she has none. They are meant for us. They can be meant for no other. And what have we to oppose them? And it goes on. Like I said, it's about 2 minutes long. Pull it up. You can find it all over the place. I think even the Russell Kirk Foundation has it. Certainly even Virginia History has it. The Avalon Project, the Academy of the Lakes is where I just read it from. History.com. Library of Congress has it. But that's the beginning. That's the first 3 paragraphs of the speech that you know so well ends with "Give me liberty" or "Give me death." And I think, and this is why I mentioned it in the last segment that brought you to say, "Please, Joe, read it to us," because it bears such similarities to the very things that you and I do here every morning. And yeah, we'll talk about the Albemarle County attempts to take away your property rights and the specifics that add up to it. Neil Williamson of the Free Enterprise Forum is coming up in a little while, and we'll get into the specifics of yet again another government body that is stricken by this idea that they know better than you what to do on your land, and perhaps hanging themselves on their own crucible of equity. But these are all but ingredients in the stew that we put together and try to say, look at what this morass has become. And the reason I brought it up is because, like, we do with our judicial system, and we get caught up in the, as Clark called and asked about the Sean Combs investigation, a.k.a. P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, Puff the Magic Dragon, I don't know. As we see with the attempts by the Republican governor of Virginia, I say it that way as Jefferson referred to the Christian king of Great Britain, the Republican governor of Virginia wants to create databases so that law enforcement can keep an eye on people who get cannabis gummies because kids are overdosing on cannabis gummies. And you say, well, Joe, aren't you against that? I'm against the database keeping, and that the use of databases can supersede warrant in the case of criminal investigations. That no warrants shall issue except on the testimony and evidence presented to a court of law. These are important free things that we, the people, and this is where I bring up the phrase the gaslit streets of Central Virginia and America beyond, because Dr. Clark's not listening in Central Virginia, and Lord knows this podcast goes all over the place now. Perhaps even further than the old smartphone app used to take us. But the reason I refer to the gaslit streets of America is that we've been convinced that we don't deserve this. We've been convinced that we can't have it. We've been convinced to sell our personal liberties for momentary sureties. And go back to the opening salvo that we had this morning. It's Teacher Appreciation Week. Decades of teachers have struggled to make ends meet, living in poverty well below the poverty line, under the idea that they're called to teach our children. And yet they've been gaslit into believing that the only way they're going to get ahead is if they keep their nose to the brownstone and suckle the right tuchus to get into a front office job that pays better than the paltry under the poverty line wages a teacher gets paid. And by the way, one of the ways you can keep your nose to the brownstone is take this curriculum paid for from a private. I was talking to a fellow very ironically works in for a for-profit company that works in educational interventions. And he says that the funny thing is that these curriculums now, the history and the math and the English curriculums, are being provided to these school divisions by for-profit companies who then claim you can't know what's in the curriculum because it's proprietary information, because a for-profit private corporation, LLC, whatever, can have that kind of privacy. What have we done? So you don't even know what your kids are being taught until it's already too late. They've been told it, taught it, indoctrinated into it. And you don't think you have an appropriate place. You're gaslit into thinking that the world, you know what, give the public schools your kids. President Biden said himself just a couple of years ago that he wanted preschool, government's preschool, to take your children at the age of 2. This is why they fight such bloodlust battles against money follows the child's school choice. And it's all a house of cards, and it's all going to come crashing down. And when the public sector crashes, what's going to be left? Are we going to be capable of educating our own children? Or are we, as happens all the time, when free societies finally reach that point of supernova, and we collapse upon ourselves under our own gravity, dictatorship takes over. Authoritarianism. Often wrapped in the same raiments we were wearing in our free society, so that on the gaslit streets of our neighborhoods, we wouldn't necessarily be able to identify the difference. And as Patrick Henry says, could we not already be there? Anyway, so I wanted to bring up this story because Senators Kain and Warner, because all that government has really devolved into, all that Congress has devolved into is an automatic teller machine, is now announcing, look at what we've done. We're going to send $98 million more dollars of other people's tax money, and by other people I mean your grandchildren at this point, into Virginia for affordable housing. 1.3 million of those dollars will go to the Charlottesville Housing and Redevelopment Authority, West Bellamy proprietor. And where does that go? What is that done so far? I bring back up the teachers who annually vote for people like Tim Kaine and Mark Warner, both endorsed frequently by the American Federation of Teachers. What has this done? What has this expenditure, what have these expenditures done to create more affordable housing? And of course, just like the teachers who continue to work for wages far below the poverty level in most of their communities, the answer is not much. So why do we keep doing it? Because we've been gaslit to the point where we think, it is what it is. This is why you run into kids who say, the system is broken. That's why they join and they get into these tent encampments on their university grounds, because they've been told by their professors, the system is broken. Dude, we haven't used the system in almost the entirety of my lifetime.
Thursday forecast calling for showers, maybe an isolated thunderstorm, otherwise mostly cloudy, highs in the lower 80s. Thursday night, chance of a shower or storm before midnight, otherwise partly cloudy, lows around 60. Friday, a slight chance of a shower, otherwise partly sunny, highs in the mid 70s with breezy northwesterly winds. By Friday night, much chillier, partly cloudy, a low around 49. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now back to Joe.
Joe Thomas in the morning. Thank you for letting us do what we do here in the podcast world, of course, on Rumble and YouTube. Time for us to go and see what Mac McDonald, our sports director, has scribbled down in his notebook this morning. How you doing, Brother Mac? How are you this morning, sir?
Well, following Knicks Pacers is setting the tone for the summer. I mean, it's just it's one storyline after another. You got Brunson being a hero running out of the locker room. You thought it was Newt Rockne. I mean, it was
Willis Reed.
Yeah, which very good, because that was 54 years ago to the day.
Really?
Yes.
Oh,
so
my
Joe,
God.
very good. Willis Reed, 1970. It's in my story here. It's
Okay,
in my
all right, cool.
But no, former Cavalier and Pacers head coach Rick Carlisle, all right, has changed his tune now after a Game 2 loss to the Knicks in the Garden Wednesday night, where his team blew a 12-point lead, dropping a 130-121 verdict. Carlisle now is building a case with the league. Now, the Pacers video staff compiled a 29-play video from Game 1 showing the NBA brass the Pacers are not receiving, in Rick's words, a balanced whistle. Carlisle told the iPads that small market teams, this is a quote, small market teams deserve a fair shot, and Indiana is not being rewarded with their physical play, but the Knicks are. I love it. Anyway, case in point, here's the Pacers head man.
5:08 of the third. The whole world knows that Halliburton's got a bad back, and Hart comes up and shoves him in the back, and JB DeRosa's looking right at it. You can see him. He's got vision of the play, and he shoves Ty right into the corner, and there's no whistle, right in the back. And so that was shocking. I can promise you that we're going to submit these tonight. New York can get ready. They'll see them too. I'm always talking to our guys about not making it about the officials. We deserve a fair shot. There's not a consistent balance, and that's disappointing.
Is Larry Bird still the GM of the Indiana Pacers?
Still we're so they're going to be there will be some. But see, here's an interesting.
Benefited a lot when he was in one of those big markets, didn't he?
Oh yeah. No, but the interesting caveat is during the regular season, if you file a complaint and you show the NBA league video, the other team really doesn't know. But in the playoffs, the Knicks will know the exact 29 plays. Like, who cares? But whether they try to fight it or whatever, that's the way it's going to be. But then the Jalen Brunson story, the Knicks point guard late in the first half left the game with a right foot injury. I think it was late in the first quarter. He returned to the Garden floor at halftime. His team was down 10. Naturally, the chants started raining down. MVP. 54 years to the day when Willis Reed pulled the tunnel trick before Game 7 of the 70 series. Joe's so smart. Your IQ is so high. Brunson led his Knicks on a 21-4 run, a 15-point swing, a 5-point lead. Knicks win the third quarter 36-18. Later, Rick was whistled for a couple of techs. He was ejected. Brunson finished with 29. There was a double dribble call that went haywire. Anyway, we'll see you Friday night. All right. So speaking of the neighborhood brawl, and not even hockey, where it's just all what broke loose last night. The Beltway battle went 12 last night, and the Orioles outlasted the Nats 7-6, losing two two-run leads. Jorge Mateo drove in the go-ahead run with the 12th inning single, and the Orioles survived another shaky outing by Craig Kimbrell to beat the Washington Nats 7-6. So, and avoid being swept. It's 103 straight series for the Orioles where they have not been swept, by the way. It's like a 2-year run. So they blew 2-run leads in the 9th, the 11th. Ryan Mountcastle put Baltimore on top 5-3 with a 2-run shot in the 11th off Hunter Harvey. But pinch hitter Lattimore Vargas hit a ground rule double. And then that was in the bottom half, made it 5-4. Anyway, it was a terrific, I watched the highlights because I was watching the Knicks Pacers. Just a couple of plays for you to show you how crazy this game was last night.
I'm not getting any audio from the file here.
From the file?
Yeah, I don't.
Well, we'll move on. Who knows what that could be me. That could be all me.
Let me try it in a different player here.
No, that's okay.
I'm going to put it in a different card player, and no, it's saying the file is. Let me see if I can get it.
That's okay. That's all right.
Hang on.
No, that's all right.
No. I'm here for you. Yeah,
No. It could
yeah,
be.
the computer is saying it doesn't recognize the file. So
So there you go. Who knows? That could be me this
well,
morning. So don't worry
but
about it.
you bring up. I mean, I just. I know it was a COVID thing. I know that it was all part of they're trying to make the game more exciting and everything else. But I just don't get this runner on second stuff in extra innings. I mean, it was 3-3 at the end of 9. I hit the rack. It was 3-3 at the end of 9, and I get up at 7-6. I'm like, holy crap! What the? And then I remember that everybody starts with a runner on second and nobody out, and I'm like, well, of course everybody's scoring.
Yeah, it's like church softball, so you can get to your Sunday night service. Juan Soto homer drove in 5. Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton also went deep. The Yankees beat the Astros 9-4 on Wednesday night. First time the power trio all connected in the same game, but the Yankees won their 5th straight and improved to 6-0 against the Astros. And if that's not enough, now the Orioles and Yankees are tied in the American League East. So we just, we'll throw that in the fire as well. Now, the quote of the day yesterday. This is so good because I am not, and it's not a Duke thing, I am not a J.J. Redick fan. I think he's a smart, insert 3-letter word here. I think he thinks he is really, really good. Just the way he tried too hard being thrown into First Take with Stephen A. and Mad Dog. He just thought I'm just not a Redick fan. And now his name is being tossed around for a lot of NBA jobs, including, I don't know, somebody mentioned the Lakers. So he does this radio show yesterday, this video podcast or whatever it was, and he's got his hat on backwards with headphones on. And so Colin Cowherd, Colin Cowherd ripped him saying, if you NBA executives don't do interviews with their hats on backwards. He goes, if you want a job, don't wear your hat back. I can hear my dad. My dad was in my ear.
Oh, yeah.
And so Colin Cowherd says, he looked like a guy moving my couch, not an NBA executive. So I thought that was that was the line of the day. But I'm just not a real JJ, not a JJ.
But that's it's supposedly it's a sign of respect for those you're speaking with, and we get.
He's doing an interview with LeBron.
Yeah, so at some point,
come on.
I used to work in Ocean City, Maryland, and I worked in the Hamptons. So you're dealing with a lot of people who, their business, their multi-million-dollar business is often serving drinks on the beach. So you'll run into a lot of business owners whose business casual is a Hawaiian shirt and cargo shorts and flip-flops, but you still approach them the first time you meet them with a jacket, tie maybe, and if they think you're overdressed, then once you get to know them, you can casual up, you
can dumb down your absolutely.
But you show respect for somebody by looking nice when you go somewhere to meet with them. I mean, my dad used to wear a jacket and tie to Shea Stadium to watch a Mets game because he would go into the Diamond Club, which was the stadium club at Shea Stadium, and he would network with people. He would actually be holding business meetings with people. Hey, I'm doing this fundraiser. Can you do the thing with the guy and the place? And he would be working. It was actually a work event. It wasn't one of those like, oh, ask me how my business is and I can write off the tickets as a business expense. He was actually networking. So people would always tease my dad that he'd be wearing his Brooks Brothers suit to a Mets game.
Exactly.
But I believe you show some respect for how you present yourself because one of our commonplace things here, Mac, is we have a right to speak, but we don't have a right to be listened to. And
no, exactly. That's so well put. So well put. Real quick story. I was a big auto show guy in Des Moines. When a car show came to Des Moines, I was growing up. A car show came to Des Moines, we went, to see all the hot rods and everything. So I used my lawnmower money to buy the sweatshirt that I wanted forever based on Goldfinger and 007. And if you remember the name of the lady who flew the planes, and it was called the Flying Circus. I won't use the first name because I'm uncomfortable saying it.
Ms. Galore.
But it was Galore.
Yeah,
okay.
Ms. Galore.
It was blank Galore, if you remember. So I had this sweatshirt that said blank Galore's Flying Circus. I bought this black, so I'll never forget. I come to breakfast to go to school because my dad was getting ready to go to school, and he lowers the Des Moines Register, the sports section. He lowers it and he goes, "No, take it off." I mean, that's all he had to say. He goes, "You are not wearing that to school." I went, Dad, it was like $8.50. The sweatshirt was like $8. I mowed 3 lawns to get this sweatshirt. He goes, "Take it off." I sold it to a friend. There was no way he's ever going to let me wear, And
oh my
goodness!
Now that shirt. My daughter works for a clothing shop. I bet you they could get you $500-600 for that sweatshirt right now. I bet you.
If I would have kept it, if I would have kept, that's okay. It's the same household where my mom sold my own one and only Mickey Mantle autographed Amana hat from Iowa after I got pushed away when I was 12 years old.
No,
the same lady who had a garage sale and gave my dad's autographed golf magazine by Bob Hope, gave that away. So that's the household that I grew up in.
But live in the now. I mean, I get a certain amount of the like, all right, but I mean, I still have the napkin that Nancy Lopez, the Burger King napkin that Nancy Lopez signed when she showed up at my Burger King with Ray Knight in tow in the '86 World Series, and then she dragged me in to get Ray Knight to sign it for her. But the story is more important than she's the Tiger Woods of women's golf. But she was a legend. But the story behind the napkin, I mean, this is memorabilia. I watch these kids; they do their memorabilia stuff, and they're showing up, and they've got 18 cards, and they're asking guys to sign 18 cards.
I built my wife let me kind of decorate my own office, and it's really kind of a museum. It's semi-junky, but it's just got a lot of stuff. Tomorrow, will you remind me to tell you the story about the 1995 Virginia win over Florida State, the epic that stopped the 29-game ACC winning streak with Mike Groh and Tiki. Will you remind me to tell you the story about what happened to the game ball that when Warwick Dunn did not cross the goal line? Will you remind me tomorrow to tell you the story, what happened?
Sure.
It's an incredible story.
Absolutely.
How a guy ends up with it. And I want to stop there because it's a terrific story on what happens.
And for you, Mac, I'm going to. In
fact, I'm going to make a note too. I'm going to put a note here.
I don't know if
FSU football story.
All right, very good. That's for tomorrow, kids. Tune in tomorrow. But here's one for you.
You gotta love teases, right? So that's
while you were regaling us with the play-by-play, I went and I got up this picture. I don't know if you can see it on your screen. But that's Willis walking out of the locker room.
I can't see it, but I can envision it. So I know that.
And I just remembered, I got a chance to interview Jerry West, and I know you have as well, to talk to Jerry West, and he talked about how all the Lakers stopped their shoot around when Willis walked out, and he knew that if Willis didn't play 1 minute, because he had blown out his knee, it was ugly when he had. But he knew
all those days.
West knew. He said we all stopped shooting, and I knew that they beat us that game before the first tip, that they had beaten us because we stopped doing what we did when he came out and just walked out. And I think he played like 2 minutes and made one basket and then left the game and never played again. I don't think he ever played again in the NBA. But
how good were those days important when you think about that?
There were guys like Walt Frazier and Dave DeBusschere who were pretty good on that team too. It wasn't like
back in the day when NBA championship games and the playoffs were tape delayed.
Yeah, you could get bowling. You could get pro bowling live, but you couldn't get the NBA live.
You think we've come a few inches?
Yeah,
I think we've moved the needle a little bit.
Good stuff.
So
good stuff.
So good.
We will.
All right, man.
Your notebook and that FSU story coming tomorrow.
All right, I've got it right here. I will not forget to tell it. It is an awesome story. So anyway, all right, we'll see you soon.
Thursday forecast calling for showers, maybe an isolated thunderstorm, otherwise mostly cloudy, highs in the lower 80s. Thursday night, chance of a shower or storm before midnight, otherwise partly cloudy, lows around 60. Friday, a slight chance of a shower, otherwise partly sunny, highs in the mid 70s with breezy northwesterly winds. By Friday night, much chillier, partly cloudy, a low around 49. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Joe Thomas in the morning. Thank you for tuning in here on the Joe Thomas in the morning program in its internet world, and you can download us. And like Star Trek in the years past, probably more popular in reruns than it is in first run syndication, but that's okay. However you get it, share it with your friends. I ran into somebody who was a longtime friend of my program, had no idea we were doing this, and he was just like, "Oh, please send me the link. I love Rumble and I love YouTube," or whatever, and lots of folks doing it out there. Joining us from the offices of the Free Enterprise Forum, you follow him on X at Neil S. Williamson, president of said Free Enterprise Forum. Good morning, Neil. How are you doing this morning, sir?
Doing well, Joe. Thank you.
Great piece in the Free Enterprise Forum yesterday regarding property rights, especially as it comes to the homestay. And I thought, as you covered it, the interplay between the Albemarle County supervisors regarding, where they stand, not necessarily just about homestay, but in the abstract of how they legislate what people can do on their property. And you have a great, almost a Bill of Rights in your column regarding what your rights are as a property owner. First and foremost, talk about the homestay regulations that as they exist and what they're talking about doing more of, or regulating what you can do with your property regarding, I guess this is like Airbnb and Vrbo and that stuff?
Right. That's the idea behind it. And Albemarle County has some, let's call them innovative regulations around short-term rentals. The one of the concerns that they have, when the ordinance was first put into place in 2019, they wanted to make certain that residential use was the primary use. Mm-hmm. And so they indicated that someone had to live on the property for X number of days. And if there was a whole house rental, there needed to be a resident, a responsible party that could be within an hour's reach.
Okay.
One of the concerns that we've identified in the implementation is that some of these properties are held by LLCs. Some of those LLCs are family LLCs. There's
Sure.
one in particular that owns 5 different properties, and 5 children, one on each property, live on the property, and they rent out their space on an Airbnb platform. And so that is a reasonable use. The concern really is one of what the supervisors think their role is in determining how you use your property. The Free Enterprise Forum believes that property rights are critically important. Mm-hmm. And much like your rights extend to push your fist, extend to the tip of my nose, your neighbors have rights too. And so we are much more concerned about the impacts of these rules on neighbors than on controlling the market.
Yeah.
Clearly, what I'm hearing from some of the supervisors is a desire not to allow short-term rental, because by not allowing short-term rental, you force owners into going to long-term rental, which would increase, in their mind, the affordable housing stock. There's a flaw in this. There was a recent study out of the western states that said, most of the Airbnb properties aren't affordable properties to begin with, because people, when they rent, are looking to stay at kind of nice places.
Yeah.
So they aren't taking away affordable housing stock. What they are taking away is they aren't taking away anything. They're providing the owner the right to do with what their property, what it is. Now, you mentioned, I often talk about the bundle of rights that are associated with property rights. You have the right of possession, the right of control, the right of enjoyment, the right of exclusion, and the right of disposition. You have additional rights as well. The point of this is you have rights, and you pay for those rights.
Right.
And you purchase them. And that's what you were quoting Thomas Paine earlier.
I appreciate you for tuning in earlier.
Well, I really lean back even further to John Locke.
Oh, sure.
And John Locke really, through his treatise, his second treatise, which he didn't even put his name on until he was dead, really his concept was life, liberty, and property. Now, Jefferson kind of stole some of that and replaced property with the pursuit of happiness.
Well, and of course, the debate at the time was that there were still arguably people that were considered property, so that's why they kind of soft-pedaled that concept. But the concept was important to them nonetheless.
Absolutely true. But the idea of property rights took a backseat. Now, I want to be fair that the idea of allowing people to utilize their property for a short-term rental and the impacts on people, I'm telling you, in my old house, I lived 19 feet from a property line where I had another house. If a young couple with 5 kids moved in, it would have more impact on me than if they rented out that house on the weekend for UVA football games. It is a question that I have about impacts. Clearly, there's a divergent view on the all-Democratic Albemarle County Board. Luckily, there was one voice that was strong in the property rights side. Ned Galloway said, I was in the minority then, which was when they discussed the ordinance, and I'm in the minority now. The fact is, a person who purchased property, somebody bought this property for a reason. The homestay use is restricted even for them. I get it. We can have this discussion every time a homestay comes up, but if you all are unhappy with the ordinance, we need to go back and deal with that. And that was from Ned Galloway.
Well, I believe you also chronicled, Diantha McKeel even said that the same thing you said, that a lot of these homestay rentals aren't in what they would consider the affordable housing zones anyway. These are not, condos in the middle of Charlottesville or Scottsville or Waynesboro even, that somebody would be renting for their family to get to work. But it also, doesn't it also, to me anyway, as I read your piece, shine the light on yet again where the best laid plans of mice and men, their intention is to create more affordable housing and more affordability for people to rent, yet they're working in these peripheries where, sure, it might get them some attention for going after somebody who owns a big farm and rents it out to people for their, bridal parties or whatever, instead of actually looking at the reasons people aren't building homes that, for example, teachers, as we come to the culmination of Teacher Appreciation Week, nobody is building apartment houses where teachers can afford to live, and they don't seem to want to address those issues.
Well, it's interesting because last week I wrote about the idea of expensive affordable housing. The Piedmont Housing Authority put forth an application, which we don't have a position on the application, but it was a 60-unit Premier Circle Phase 2 apartments. The total project cost estimated over $20 million. That works out to $334,166 per unit.
Ooh.
Well, I will tell you that while that may be bad, but in the commercial world, I think you'd probably be looking at $250,000. But if you go back even further, in February, the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development published the cost of a federally supported 6th Street apartment phase 1 complex in Charlottesville, $29 million project to produce 47 affordable rental units at a cost greater than $621,000 a unit.
But how is that affordable? I mean, because the person who's building it has to recoup those costs, so therefore that's what drives up the cost of whoever owns the property at the end of it is going to rent it otherwise.
No, Joe. This is the government. They're here to help.
That's right. I forgot that part. I forgot the magical.
This is a government project that has government subsidies, that will be government housing, 47 affordable rental units. Even though they cost greater than $621,000 per unit, the rental rates will be subsidized by taxpayers that create this affordable housing, 47 units of affordable housing. We haven't dug into the details of why it was so expensive, et cetera. The bottom line is it's expensive to produce housing in this region. And why is it expensive? Well, part of it is the land. There is less than 5% of the land in Albemarle County available for development. That's a crime.
Mm-hmm.
We look at other localities that have 40% of their land mass available. And they actually think that they are being very conservation minded. I think that we have advocated for well over a dozen years for expansion of the development area.
Mm-hmm. And
we are just now getting folks talking about when they might talk about expanding the development area.
It is a long erosion, but it is at least a sign of life in that. But isn't there another factor in this, Neil, where if you've got a contract, and you mentioned this publicly funded public housing, so these are companies who are hired by the government to build this apartment building or this affordable housing complex. They are now being paid this rate to pour the concrete, to put in the plumbing, to run the electrical. So if I'm looking to build a private complex of houses or just an individual house, now I go out into the world of electrical contractors and concrete masons, etc., and say, what's the rate? And they say, well, I just got X from the city of Charlottesville or the federal government, Federal Housing Authority, so I'm going to charge that. It creates this inflated rate structure by inserting government money, which in order to get a project done that elected officials want to get done will be done, damn the torpedoes, damn the cost, but it also then skews the marketplace for people who want to build privately constructed housing, doesn't it?
It does, and it skews the market is the best way to put it, because it really takes away capacity. The capacity to do X number of homes in a year is reduced by whatever those homes that are being done at government.
Right.
Bottom line is we're not building enough housing. Last year, single family homes, Albemarle County had 111. 111. Mm-hmm. This is a county of 721 square miles. 111 single family homes. That we're not building enough, and we haven't for decades. What are we going to do? And I actually think you're going to be seeing the brunt of it over on the other side of the mountain, because that's where people are choosing to live, because that's where there's a reasonable regulatory regime that allows affordable housing to be built.
But we're seeing the same thing, we haven't even launched over there yet, and people are saying, well, we don't want more come-heres. There are people who are campaigning against our takeover of the station, saying, oh, it's just another bunch of come-heres from the Charlottesville side. Weldon Cooper Center talks about, I think the last research they did, 4,000 people drive from the Stanton, Waynesboro, Fishersville area across the mountain to either work for UVA, for the police and schools, or for the government, federal government defense contracting businesses, because it's where they can afford to find that home that you're talking about there. The capacity also works the other way. We talk about this. The affordability of housing also plays a role in the availability of jobs that will pay you well enough. We were talking about this in abstract earlier. It's the second to last day of Teacher Appreciation Week, but most teachers work at what is considered below I just found out what the median wage in Virginia is, $73,000 a year. I would say a lion's share of our public school teachers work for less than that per year. And the front page of Time magazine talks. The teacher is saying, "I work 2 extra jobs and I sell my plasma for rent money." The plight of these folks who are teaching our kids I think are another side of this. You create more affordable housing for the people who can actually afford the housing.
Right, and those are really workforce housing issues because these folks are working hard, and they're being priced out of the market. Why? Because of government controls. The government controls where you can build and how much you can build because of land availability, of lines in Albemarle County that were drawn during the Jimmy Carter administration. A lot has changed since Jimmy Carter's time.
Yep.
And I do believe that we can say that no one is living in the complex that was approved for Biscuit Run. It is now a state park.
Yeah.
That is a loss of development area. We need to grow the development area in Albemarle County to be responsible stewards of the land.
Sure. And it's to the benefit of all the other areas in the region. I was talking to Tommy Stafford from Blue Ridge of Life magazine. They talk about what's going on in Nelson County with developments being proposed at the foot of Wintergreen and along the 151 corridor where, again, Nelson County is out there saying, well, if they can't afford to live in Albemarle, maybe they'll come live here in Nelson. And you see that, and you still look at the workforce housing and you say somebody has to be building at that price point, and that's where I feel like we're missing that step, because like you said, you skew the marketplace so nobody can build SRO apartments. But there's also the regulatory capture where when somebody like a Jeff Leonard comes along and says, I want to build single room occupancy or 1-bedroom apartments in the Cherry Avenue neighborhood, they were told, I'm sorry, it wasn't in our 20-year master plan 15 years ago when we wrote it, so we can disapprove your project. Your facepalm over that, saying this guy actually wanted to do it on his own volition. Let him do it.
Right, and the concept that you're talking about in many respects speaks to the idea of what can government do. Well, one of the things government can do is what they call a synthetic tax increment financing deal, whereby you've got a plot of land and it's in the development area and you want to have your master plan have a building there. Well, that plot of land produces X in tax revenue. Retain that X, let somebody build apartments there that are available for workforce housing, and that value is Y and produces tax revenue of Y. You still get X, but they get the Y back based upon performance standards. This is a model that is working in Albemarle County right now.
Really?
And I am working hard with others to try and get Albemarle County's new Housing Albemarle out of its backside and into a form that actually can make a difference and create workforce housing for folks here in the county that work for Albemarle County and are the people, they're our neighbors. We want to have teachers and firefighters and police officers as our neighbors. They're the fabric of the community.
Right, and they're the ones who are going to care the most about it, therefore are going to be the best neighbors, I would imagine. But, isn't a program that helps you get a tax break for building sort of indicative of the fact that the taxes in many ways are the impediment to it?
You could argue that, but I would suggest that it is the regulatory regime surrounding the building creates that the need for that tax break. And I think that the idea of a going forward tax break provides supervisors the ability to say, hey, we're not spending the money, we're just not taking in the additional money. Now, those units are going to create costs, but the community should be, if the community wants affordable housing, the community should invest in affordable housing. And this is a way to invest future dollars in affordable housing.
Let me last one on this. How much of the Albemarle County housing inventory is in Homestay or is a homestay? Do we have a number on it? Do we have any feeling? Is it 1%? Is it less than 1%? Because I have a feeling that in a little bit of a fashion, this is the supervisors taking on an issue that really isn't a big issue, but would score them the points of saying, oh, these guys, they just own a big piece of land and they're renting it because they're rich oligarchs or whatever epithet they want to throw out, but it's not really as big an issue as it's coming out to sound like. What do you think on that, Neil?
Well, I think your idea of class warfare is real. One of the applications that came forward last week was a retiree who does not live in the county and has the parcel in an LLC, and the chair suggested, well, that sounds like an investor. She wants to retire to this property, but it sounds like an investor, and we don't want that. Why not?
Yeah. Well, and also just saying the initials LLC, you start an LLC to create, an environment where business can be done, and there are protections and there are reasons that people start LLCs to employ people, because there's also an employment aspect to these homestays, contractors and cleaning crews and things like that are employed maintaining them. But I find that interesting that just by having an LLC, somebody's red flag got thrown up.
It's true, and the economic ripples from short-term rentals far greater than just the actual direct impact. Remember, that's boosting tourism, which, by the way, is a huge business driver here. Yeah. City Council heard about that just the other day. The idea that short-term rentals drive restaurant visits, sure. They drive small businesses on the mall getting business. All of that is very true. And I think the capacity of short-term rentals, and people are choosing them, it is the market answering a demand. And I don't see why government, beyond impacts, which I do agree, impacts should be handled, sure. Beyond impacts, why should government be involved?
Well, and that's unfortunately the camel who gets its nose under the tent flap sometimes, Neil, creates that. And this just was sent to me at jtinthemorningradio@gmail.com. And I think I know the answer, but you would know better. The homestays do pay transient occupancy tax now, because that was the first, if I remember, the first foray into arguing about the homestay industry was that these folks were not paying the room tax, if you want to call it that hotels were paying.
Right. If you operate a homestay in Albemarle County, you must have a business license. You must pay B-poll taxes. You must pay all transient occupancy taxes, as well as property taxes on your land.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because it was a question that me, I could answer the question and it could sound, accurate, but you would be the one to have it. Thank you, sir. What are you working on next at the Free Enterprise Forum?
We're examining, tonight we're going to a meeting regarding the North 29, the Rivanna Station. Mm-hmm. It seems as though Albemarle County, when they have their own application, they can get a rezoning done in 90 days, whereas the private sector, it takes a year. I'm interested to see how they do that.
They know which forms to fill out right away, I guess, Neil. I remember the last time you were on with us, that was the issue. So that's tonight, Rivanna Station. Neil, look forward to reading about it. freeenterpriseforum.wordpress.com. Have a great morning, sir, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Joe.
Thursday forecast calling for showers, maybe an isolated thunderstorm, otherwise mostly cloudy, highs in the lower 80s. Thursday night, chance of a shower or storm before midnight, otherwise partly cloudy, lows around 60. Friday, a slight chance of a shower, otherwise partly sunny, highs in the mid 70s with breezy northwesterly winds. By Friday night, much chillier, partly cloudy, a low around 49. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Leaders for the Boy Scouts of America announcing today that they are making a change to the organization's name.
Steve Iwanek spoke with some scout leaders here in Northwest Ohio. So, Steve, what does this mean for kids wanting to be a scout?
Yeah, Jeff and Kaylee, this means that any kid, boy or girl, can now be a part of the Scouting America organization. It's a transition that seemed to be coming for a while, but now is reality in the near future.
There's lots of families that have girls, and because the word boy is in the title, they probably just assume, oh, my daughter can't be a Boy Scout.
Not anymore. After 114 years as Boy Scouts of America, the organization, soon to be renamed Scouting America, will be open for anyone to join.
The name scouting is a nice general term. It's one we've used for years and years and years.
And that is the key to what I was pointing out earlier. This was all part of the master plan to eventually change scouting from Boy Scouting to and I mentioned this, that I was a Boy Scout and both of my sons were Boy Scouts, but my daughter was also a Girl Scout. And they did different things and they took different tacks, and some would wonder, and I say this as somebody who observed both from a parent's perspective. The girls were much more about how they were going to be part of the community. Boy Scouts, they learned things and they did things. I'm not, believe me, I'm not taking girls over boys. I'm just saying that it seemed like the girls were doing much more commercially aware things. They were taking part in activities that, obviously the famous Girl Scout cookies. Can my sons now go sell Girl Scout cookies? Are we allowed to do that? But in this zeal for political correctness, as we finish up on this, one of the things I noticed in my daughter's Girl Scout troop, which, by the way, my wife and her friend had to start on their own because the Skyline Council said that we lived in the hood and therefore nobody was interested in starting a Girl Scout troop. True story. This is 14, 15 years ago, so it's not like... When my reaction to that statement, when my wife came back and said she was gobsmacked by it, I said, isn't the hood exactly where you need a Girl Scout troop, or a Boy Scout troop for that matter? And I remember the kids that my daughter, I mean, every week, my daughter would bring 2 or 3 more girls home. I think her troop wound up being like 8 or 9 people in a couple of weeks. And I remember the first Girl Scout cookie sale they did. And these young girls from broken homes, single-parent homes, on government assistance and all these things, my wife and her partner in the Girl Scout troop said, listen, we're going to go sell Girl Scout cookies, and we get to keep the money we make from it, and we will do something cool with it. We'll decide later, but you get to... It was like dropping a dry sponge into water. I wanted to hire all these kids. Granted, they were 8 or 9 years old, so there were state laws. But these kids were go-getters who were out there and talking to people. Hey, would you like to show you? These were better salespeople than all the coffee gets closers consultants could ever come up with, because they were told you can achieve this. And I just worry that we're losing that, whether it be Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, but they are different and they do different things. And perhaps genericizing it all takes away a whole lot of that specialty. And get off my lawn. since you probably think that's the kind of guy I am for that statement. Anyway, until tomorrow morning, Friday has arrived. We will try to culminate Teacher Appreciation Week with some people who will share and will discuss the thoughts we had on teachers this morning. We'll extrapolate a little bit more on that. Until then, so long, and thanks for all the fish.